welcome, welcome. I am so excited to be here. Joining me right now is none other than Aijia Waithe. And welcome, Aijia. We're so happy to have you today. How you doing?
Thank you so much. I am great. I'm so glad to be here amongst other creatives, musicians, but also to have the space to talk all things mental health and creativity.
Listen, we are so excited.
Yeah.
And if you are joining us for the first time, y'all, my name is Joel Reed. I am the executive director here at Soundcheck, and we just want to welcome you. We're a space all about empowering and furthering musicians, artists, creatives. If that's you, and you're looking to further your craft as a musician, this is the place for you. And of course, we're going to be talking all things mental health today. And Aijia, why don't we just start off with a little bit of an introduction? I know you've been in and out of different spaces in your profession and even as an artist. And why don't you just talk to us a little bit and tell us a little bit more about yourself? We'll start like that.
Sure. Well, so as Joel said, I am Aijia Waithe. I am a registered psychotherapist qualifying, but I am also a musician,
Awesome.
a vocalist who is a musician, and I also teach. I teach vocals, and my career essentially has been 15 plus years in the performing arts. So what that comprised of was me working as a vocalist internationally and locally. I was involved in a lot of different musical theater productions.
Awesome.
I've done some voiceover work for film and television, and
Great.
now I'm doing therapy.
Awesome. And Aijia, there's actually a really unique connection that folks maybe don't know about. But of course, many, many years ago, right?
Yeah.
Soundcheck, before where we are currently,
Yeah.
many years ago, I know you were engaged and kind of around in some of our programs and projects. And so isn't it
Yes.
so great just to see everything come around full circle?
Amazing.
That must have been what, like easily
7,
6,
8
7
years.
yeah,
Yeah.
at least, right?
Yeah.
Years ago, and just to
Yeah.
see how you've blossomed in your career and family and everything else. We're
Thank
just
you.
so glad to have you here sharing on our platform.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. And so so you mentioned your journey, just sort of getting into your profession and your field, and of course starting in vocals and going into therapy. And what was it for you that really landed? Like, what was that moment that just let you know this is the path that I'm on,
Yeah.
and I know it's meaningful?
Yeah, so there was 2 moments. I would say in high school when I started to, make deeper connections with people and recognizing how they use the arts to manage a lot of different life situations.
Right.
So that I found interesting. But then when I went overseas, I was in Australia doing production, and it was just
Wow,
me,
okay.
God in the water.
My goodness, Australia.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I recognized that the interactions I had off stage after seeing thousands of people that would tell me, this song that you sang or this thing that you guys did really blessed me. I'm going through a divorce, or I'm going through
Right.
various life challenges. Just to see the impact of the arts on people's personal lives, and
Got you.
really confirmed to me that that was the direction I needed to take.
Got you. No, that's incredible. And
Yeah.
like just hearing like the impact, right? And how you were on this journey and on this path, and seeing how folks were saying, hey, music is important. Like, music is helping me. Music is helping
Yeah.
me to get through and get past certain things. And so I think that's so important. So thank you so much. And Aijia, I know you've got like a wonderful presentation for us.
Yeah.
I've got my iPad here. I'm ready to take some notes and just learn and join. And of course, there's some folks in the room as well. And
Yes.
I know they'll have some questions, and you're going to be taking us on this great journey. So I'm super excited. Do you want to just sort of dive in and
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. Let's
Sure,
do
we
it.
can absolutely dive in. So, essentially, we are talking today about heart and soul, how mental health affects us or impacts the life of a musician.
Awesome.
So, we're gonna start with a little bit of a icebreaker. I know that there's some people online, there's some people in the room, but I want to open the floor. I'll be participating as well. If we can go to the next slide, please.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So this icebreaker is essentially called About. So we're going to share our first names or your artist name if that's what you're more comfortable with. Then we're going to share a song that describes your mood today. And then we're going to talk about what you hope to learn in this discussion workshop today.
Awesome.
Yeah. So do you want to start, Joel?
Yeah, sure. So, of course, I'm Joel. I don't have an artist name. Joel Reed, I guess it's my artist name.
Love it.
A song that describes my mood today. Wow. I would say, man, Grateful by Hezekiah Walker. Like that's just
Love it.
that's my song for today.
Love
What am I hoping to learn? Listen, I'm just excited. Like I know that there's a very close connection between music and mental health.
Yes.
And even as a musician, like on my journey as a guitarist, you know, learning and playing and like it's therapeutic. Like just being able to unleash and express yourself and you know worship whatever it is you do with your instrument. And so for me, I know how important and meaningful music is in my life.
Yes.
And so I'm just so excited to hear about the many ways in which music can benefit and help as we're navigating through our mental health journeys. Yeah.
Yes, love that.
Awesome.
Is there anyone online that would like to jump in?
Or in the room.
Or
'cause
in
we've
the
got
room,
some
yeah.
folks here as well.
We don't want to. Anyone
Do
here?
we have I think we have a mic for some folks in the room as well.
Well, I'll go before we get ready.
Yeah.
So,
While we wait.
so my name is Aijia. A song that describes my mood today is "Lovely Day" by Bill Withers.
Okay. Yeah.
Love that
Classic,
song.
right?
Classic.
Uh-huh.
And what I hope to learn, as much as I'm helping to facilitate this discussion, I hope to learn from you guys. I think that there is so much power in being able to learn from each other. And just because, you know, I may be here sharing what I know and my expertise,
Right.
I'm excited to be able to learn from your perspectives throughout this discussion.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Incredible. And I know we're grabbing a mic for some folks in the room so that they can sort of share and speak as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, folks, if you're in the room or if you're online, feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
We want to hear. This is going to be an interactive.
We want to hear you.
Listen, we're here, Asia. We know we could talk, but we want to hear from you all. We want to hear from the folks in the room. We want to hear from the folks online. Don't be shy, y'all.
Yes.
Unmute yourselves. You know, talk about, like, we're going to have some time today. We're going to be able to talk. So we want to hear from you all.
Yes. All right. Who wants to start in the room? Do we have mics?
I think we got, yeah.
Nice.
I think we've got it.
Awesome. All right. Does anyone in
Any
the room
brave
want to?
souls?
Yeah. Okay, so essentially it's for you to share your name or artist name, a song that describes your mood today, and what you hope to learn through this workshop.
So my name is Rod Purpose, which is my stage name actually. The song that describes my mood today is "Today" by Kirk Franklin.
Okay.
I know through the ups and downs, sometimes it really helps having something that makes you feel triumphant,
For real.
which is that.
That's huge.
And I'm hoping to learn how that connection is made between music and mental health. That's
Awesome.
really at the core of what I want to learn today.
Love that, man. Thank you. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. Love that. Anyone else want to share? Should we move on?
Yeah, I'd love to hear from everyone. If
Yeah.
You can.
Awesome. Welcome.
And my stage name would just be Tamoya.
Hey,
That's all
Tamoya.
right. That's all right. That works.
Yeah.
And the song that really puts me in the mood is called Put a Smile on Your Face by Vitamin C.
Okay.
Because as she states in her chorus, put a smile on your face, make the world a better place.
There you go.
And I find that really catching, and it really just takes it to the heart, if you know what I mean. It just really, because like the world it's just kind of like, with what's going on and with like the pandemic, and then there's depression, and, it's just people going through some stressful things in their daily lives. I feel like with music, especially in general, it just really kind of lightens the day and just, puts you in a better mood.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. What are you hoping to learn in our discussion workshop today?
I'm hoping to learn more about, especially with music therapy, and to dive more deeper into it.
Love it.
And with health and wellness, especially with music, they combine well together, and I think it would just give people a more better understanding and an idea of what they would want to go moving forward.
Yes. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you so
Thanks
much
for sharing so much. Appreciate that, Tomoy. I know we've got a couple of other folks in the room as well. We'd love to hear from you. There's some folks online as well.
Okay.
So yeah, feel free to unmute and just talk to us.
Yeah. Anyone else online or in the room? So essentially, just to recap in case you just logged on or just walked in, we're talking, it's an icebreaker for you to share your name or your stage name or artist name if you have, a song that describes your mood today, and what you hope to learn in this workshop.
So for folks that are in the room, there's a mic right there. And for folks that are online, just unmute.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Hi. I'm doing good. I'm doing good. My name is so my artist name is Cap Mighty,
Love it.
and the song that's I guess describing for today is a song called Who Do I Call from Trippie Redd and MGK. It's from the recent tape. Like the reason for that is because like how do you say like the reason is because I'm going through like hard times, dealing with grief or dealing with sudden changes and like this life changes in general, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like that song like currently it's like resonating with me with with the subject matter for that song. Like who did I call for support,
Yes.
things like that.
Right.
Yeah, and what was the last question? Like
What you hope to
why?
learn? What you hope to learn in the workshop today?
To be honest, I'm not 100% sure,
That's okay.
but
Yeah.
I would say finding ways on how to on how to do, I guess, self-care practices for musicians.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Great.
And I know
Yeah,
that
like finding certain
Yes.
tools.
we'll be diving
Yeah.
We'll be diving in it. I really appreciate you sharing what you did. And before we continue on in this discussion, it is important to me as a clinician and just as a person here, whatever we share in this space, it may be very vulnerable things that people may be open to sharing.
Right.
And I just hope that we all can honor what people may share and, without judgment, and just allow this to be a safe space. So without laughing or, just being mindful of that this is a space today for people to share if they feel comfortable.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Were there any others that wanted to just share before we move on, either online or in person? Please don't be shy, y'all. We want to hear from you.
Okay.
Yeah, come on up. Go on up, man. We got you. Thanks so much.
All right, good night. I'm Rashidi. Don't really have a stage name.
Oh, good.
Had a hard time thinking about a song that feels like me today. But if anything, I'd say like "Happy" by Pharrell Williams because I'm in a good mood.
That's
Love it.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And what do you think you want to learn today? Is there anything you think?
Honestly, probably I came because the session sounded interesting, so I'm willing to learn whatever I can.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for being here.
Thanks for coming, man. Appreciate you. Awesome. Any others? We're going to be moving on. Last call. We'd love to hear from you. All right. Yeah, we'll keep it moving then,
Yeah.
and yeah. So go
Okay,
ahead.
so we'll move on to the next slide, please. Hopefully online you can see the slide. If you cannot see it, you can let us know, okay? You can just unmute and let us know. Up. This way? All right. Up. Okay. Hopefully you can hear me better. So as we get into this discussion, this is just for you to reflect within yourself. It's not for you to share it. I want you to just take a second to get focused into this space and what we're about to talk about, because mental health can be very touchy for some of us. And just identify where is your heart today? The reason I want you to just think about where is your heart today is because the heart is essentially like the soil of everything that we feel, everything that we think about, and the things that we do in our lives. And so sometimes amongst the busy, especially as creative people, sometimes our minds are just going. We have so many ideas overflowing that we don't always take the time to just take a second and check in and be like, okay, where am I at right now? So where is your heart today? Next slide, please. Nope, you skipped one. Thank you. And then along with that question, I want you to, thank you. Ask yourself, how is your mind? How is your mind today? So how is your heart? Is it heavy? Is it feeling peaceful? And how is your mind? Are your thoughts all over the place? Do you feel like numb? Do you feel excited about something? Let's just kind of reflect on where we're at, because it will impact how you receive the information today, and how you go away with it. Okay. Come on in. Hello, hello. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next slide. Okay. So mental health is a buzzword, guys. Throughout social media, all of us have heard this word, I'm sure, before. But what is it? What is mental health? And before we go through the slide and I talk about it from a professional standpoint, how would you guys describe mental health? When you hear that term,
Shout it out, y'all.
Yeah.
Feel free.
What is
What's
mental health?
Wellness. I like that. All right.
Wellness. Love that.
Mental illness.
Mental illness. Yeah.
Keeping your head in a, yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, keeping your head in mindset.
Mindset, keeping your head in a good position.
Yep.
What else comes to mind, y'all? Mental health. Emotional balance, yeah.
Yeah, these are all really, really good. So essentially, according to the American Psychological Association, so it's basically the body that comes up with a lot of these definitions. It's a state of mind characterized by emotional well-being, good behavioral adjustment, relative freedom from anxiety and disabling symptoms, and the capacity to establish constructive relationships and cope with the ordinary demands and stresses of life. So it's not perfection. Mental health is just like your physical health. It's just about your mind and your emotions and your behavior. Gotcha. So it's all encompassing, essentially the health of the mind. And for various individuals, your mental health can be moderate. It can be acute. So acute just means kind of very severe, right? A lot of people who may have severe mental health issues have acute mental health conditions. Or it could be chronic. Okay?
Just that idea of emotional well-being.
Yes.
Like we always think of well-being as, oh, I'm sick, or, you know, physical, right? But this idea like I'm actually unwell, but it's not necessarily something
that you can
like
see?
Yeah, that I can see or feel, or maybe not quite a headache, or maybe not quite an ear, and you know, but
yeah.
I can still, it's affecting me, right? It's still impacting me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the reason why I wanted to start with this definition is because a lot of us who may be online or here in the room are BIPOC individuals, Black individuals or individuals from other colored communities. And within our communities and our cultures, there's stigma attached to mental health. We don't quite
That's so true.
understand,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
We don't understand what it is. We know the word, but we don't know what it means. And so
Right.
when you don't understand something, it can be hard to place value on it, right? And so the reason why mental health is important to talk about amongst us as musicians, as creatives, is because a lot of the life and a lot of what is required as a musician or a creative person requires you to be, you know, somewhat stable. And when that doesn't happen, tragedy often follows. And some of the pictures I posted here on this slide, Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, Michelle Williams, Demi Lovato, Kid Cudi, like they all have dealt with mental health issues. And you wouldn't necessarily know by attending a concert or by seeing a red carpet, you know, photo on Getty Images. Mental health is something you cannot see. It is something that is hard for some people to describe, but it is important to know that how you are doing in your mind doesn't mean that that's how the next person beside you at work or even within a band, that they're doing well. So just keeping that in mind.
Awesome.
Next slide, please.
And I know folks have questions along the way as well.
Yeah,
right?
feel
Aijia,
free.
They can ask as well.
Feel free. So this next slide is talking about how does being a creative affect our mental health? Let's talk about it. How do you think as a musician, as a creative person, how does it affect your mental health being creative? In a good way, in a not so good way? What do you guys think? There's a list there, but just off the top of your minds.
If you can speak in the mic, that'd be perfect. And just we want everyone to be able to hear online and yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the sorry, 1 second.
No problem.
Yeah, I think one of the sorry, the question was what was some
How
of
does
the
being a creative affect your mental health?
Yeah, it can affect your mental health being a creative maybe when you're under pressure to create usually and to deliver in a sometimes unrealistic manner or in a timely manner. It can sometimes even mess just even with your confidence, maybe your ability to even do something because you're under pressure and then, you know, self-doubt and certain things. I think that's probably one of the main, and also I would say just to even maintain that level of excellence that you give or that you advertise that you give, having to keep that consistent, especially maybe even in depending on what you're doing, say different genres of music or trying to, it's people's expectations, right? It's people's expectations of you.
Yeah, awesome. And actually, if you can just help pass the mic around, that might be easier for folks. I know they may just want to respond and just,
Yeah, I think just to add to that, a lot to do with your identity. I think we identify with our abilities, and as creatives, if the value of our creativity is not seen, we often feel like our identity is also not being seen. And so it does play on your mind where you feel like your self-worth is based on the praise of your abilities as a creative.
The validation.
And so the validation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's definitely one of those battles that creatives definitely can relate to, where they feel like the more I'm praised, the more I'm seen, which then means the more value I bring or I am. And so
but
that's
so
external.
interesting just hearing you say that, because it's like, is it the praise of others that really validates our art? Like art being art in of itself, you know what I mean? Like, is it like you would think that it's the beauty and just the value that it is regardless of who noticed. You know what I mean? Obviously you want people to notice, but it's like I can definitely relate to that idea of oh, if someone else doesn't see this as good, then is it really good?
Yes.
You know, and why and then we almost have to ask ourselves, why are we asking ourselves that question? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's good. Anyone else want to add or
I guess like a positive of being creative would be that you're able to get like your feelings and emotions and you're able to put them out there.
Yeah.
Even if you
Yeah.
have no place to actually tell someone, or you feel
Exactly.
you don't have a place to tell someone or talk about it,
Yeah.
you can still get it out there and get it out of your system.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think there's a hand right there. Yeah.
Thank you. And can you repeat the question just so I have some clarity in my response?
Sure. So it was, how does being a creative affect your mental health?
Right. I find that for myself and many other creatives who do it professionally, we have an additional burden in that creating is often something that people do for fun. A lot of people, you know, make art, they paint, they sing, they write songs for hobby. It's their way to express, you know, beyond their normal everyday lives. But for those of us for whom this is a career, it's a difficult line to toe because how much of it is that we're able to just be a human and create and do it for the sake of our own health and our own expression
Yeah.
versus now we have an obligation or a responsibility to do this for others because you know there are expectations attached to our creativity, there's expectations attached to our output.
Yes.
And so when we choose to be vulnerable in our art, you know, it can be cathartic to us, but also we've now exposed ourselves
Yep.
to others, and it can create some dissonance where we're trying to figure out, well, how much of myself should I give, can I give, is healthy for me to give? And I know that's something that I personally have battled with.
Awesome.
Oh, I appreciate
Thanks
you
for
saying
sharing.
that. And one thing that you really touched on is vulnerability. And I think one of the common challenges amongst a lot of musicians is the idea of my art is a very, very vulnerable part of me, and I'm putting it out there for, if not the world to see, other people to see often, right? And so fear of judgment, fear that other people will judge, as you know, Rod mentioned, that you know, if somebody judges me in a negative way based on my perception, then that must mean that my art isn't of value. Therefore, I'm not of value because the art is a part of me.
Right.
And so, yeah, those are definitely some of the common challenges, right? Having just kind of that expectation. And then I also said that sometimes it can heed anxiety for a lot of people, right? The stress and the feeling to like deliver. I know for myself, a lot of people like stories. So I know for myself, when I was I worked on celebrity cruises for a year, and when I was overseas and I had the expectation to deliver, even if I had a stomach flu, even if I was backstage, and I had to deliver because
matter,
you had people spending X amount of thousands of dollars for their cruise.
For an
They're
experience,
expecting for an
yeah.
experience.
Right.
That caused a lot of anxiety for my experience at times when I wasn't feeling my best all the time. So I feel like a lot of people face that. But some of the pros, as you mentioned, is, you know, the fact that you get to express your thoughts and your feelings. There's an element of flexibility as well in creativity and in art, right? So there's not necessarily a one size fits all in art, right? You do what you do in your own way, which is so beautiful. So if you're a person that doesn't like so much structure all the time, that can really be helpful for you. And it's also an opportunity to be vulnerable, to it can be an element of safety for a lot of people. If you don't necessarily have a life experience where you have a family or friends that you can talk to openly about your emotions. I know for a lot of the Black community, right, we don't necessarily talk about emotions.
That's true. Yeah.
Openly.
It's shunned, right? It's not something that, you know, like, I know even for me, it's like, you know, I grew up in like, you know, Caribbean kind of, you know, background and whatnot. And it's just like, yeah, like the mentality is more so, you know, deal with it, right? Or get open. You know,
you gotta do. You do what you gotta do, right?
Yeah.
But some of us also, because we grew up in this way, we haven't learned how to name our emotions, right? So we are now used to saying things like, "Oh, I feel some type of way," but that's not. How do you feel? What do you feel hurt by what the situation kind of gathered? But we don't know how to articulate these things. But in music or in art, you are able to express it without words, and let it out. Even if you don't have the words, you just let it out, and you know that you released something that was either bottled up or that you needed to say.
Right. I love that idea because, like, on one hand, like, I know I've heard some folks talk about, you know, maybe some of the pressures, especially as you look, you know, to do your art or your music as a career.
Yes.
on the flip side of that, there's also a lot of motivation and, you know, just reward in knowing that, wow, like, imagine I can do something that I love and someone out there will find value in as much or insofar as I can actually live off of this thing, right?
Yes.
So like it's definitely, on to your point, Asia, can be very stressful at times because it's like it is production based and it's like, oh, I've got to do it now and I've got to produce and I've got to, you know, maintain that high level, and sometimes that can be stressful. But on the flip side of it, it's also like, wow, like, oh my gosh, like I can literally do something that I love. And I would do this, most creatives would probably do it even if they weren't getting paid for it, just because it's that valuable to them. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And so I just think it's so interesting how those two things are tied
Yeah.
together. Yeah.
No, for sure, for sure. Does anyone else want to add anything or any thoughts about what we're just talking about on this slide?
And I know there's some folks online. If at
Yeah.
any point,
Chime
y'all,
in, guys.
you want to chime in, you're part of this conversation, unmute. We'd love to hear from you.
Okay.
And if not, yeah, we can
Yeah.
just keep it.
And feel free to just speak if something comes up and you want to say something online or in person. You can do that. I won't take offense to it. And all right, next slide, please. So 71, in a study in 2020, there was a study done in the UK for just over 2,000 musicians. It was a voluntary study. And out of those 2,211 musicians, to be exact, 71.1% of them said that they dealt with high levels of anxiety, and 68%, I think it was 68.8% of them also dealt with depression as well.
Wow.
Something that a lot of people don't know or recognize is anxiety, different types of anxiety, and depression or low mood symptoms are often comorbid. So comorbid means usually if you have one, you tend to have a higher chance of experience the other.
Okay.
Right? So, for example, people who are anxious, anxiety is essentially defined as an irrational fear of something or a
okay.
perceived fear of something.
Okay, interesting.
So if somebody is really anxious about something, sometimes people have various fears and therefore it hinders them from doing something, then that can lead to depression because they feel bad for not being able to do the thing. So there's a tie there, right?
right.
And then it kind of loops around in a
Cycle.
circle.
Yeah, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the reason I wanted to share this stat with you guys is because as musicians, a lot of us are struggling in silence. If you are somebody who is a touring musician or even an aspiring musician, you just kind of jam with your friends, wherever you're at in your artistic journey, 9 times out of 10 or 7 times out of 10 based on this stat,
Yeah, right.
there is somebody that is going through something and using music as a way to help cope.
Right.
And that isn't necessarily a bad thing. However, sometimes we can use our art, our music, to be the Band-Aid and not actually deal with the issue. And therefore, we see it in situations like the Michael Jacksons and the Whitney Houstons,
Right.
and, you know, when they don't actually deal with the root issue.
Right. That's interesting because it's like, as you mentioned, like there's almost a disconnect between the artist and the art in that sense, right? Because it's like, because the art is good, therefore the person making the art must be good, but that may not always be the case, right?
That's good. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's interesting. I read something this week about, you know, music is good for the brain, or there's a book out there that's talking about how music is generally good for our brains and our well-being. However, oftentimes the musician, the person making the music, isn't always good. So current research shows that it exercises your brain. So we have a lot of different aspects of the brain. We have our prefrontal cortex, we have our hippocampus, and all these different parts of our brains that help us to process emotion, help us to hold on to memory, and it helps us to exercise all those different parts of the brain. So it's structural,
Wow.
it's architectural, and it's mathematical. The same side of the brain, the left side, that you use for music, you use for math, I don't know how that's true because I don't like math.
Interesting.
I'm not great
That's
at
the
math.
same side?
Same side.
Interesting. Okay.
It makes sense if I don't know if anyone here is into theory or knows much about it or counting even, but yeah, I mean, math is involved in music. Music is math, essentially. Our limbic system activates. So the limbic system in your mind, this is a little bit of neurobiology. It helps to elicit emotional processing as well as memory. So this is why, you know, when they say people who are expecting, you know, play classical music for your baby, it will help them get smarter. It's not necessarily about that, but it just helps to develop good memory, lasting memory.
Interesting.
And then it also helps to release a chemical in our brains called dopamine. Have you guys heard of the word dopamine, serotonin? So those are neurotransmitters, and they are essentially these chemicals that fire out that help us to feel good. So even when it comes to music, listening to something, you get those goosebumps, that feeling is because your brain is releasing a lot of dopamine. That can also happen when you work out or if you see something or see someone that you really appreciate or love. So that's what music does to our brains. And it also helps to reduce anxiety, the perception of pain, and high blood pressure.
So like this is like proven, like
It's
this
proven.
is demonstrated, like music is good for you.
It's good. Okay, so we have started to talk about this already, but artistic expression is a therapeutic tool. What is a therapeutic tool? So essentially, that just means anything that we use in our lives that help us to navigate our healing journey, grief, our self-growth or realization or self-awareness journey. Something that helps us to just become what we either want to become or who we believe we are meant to become. So being an artist or expressing through art, through music in this case that we're discussing here, helps us to regulate emotions. A lot of us have difficulty regulating ourselves when it comes to our emotions. So a lot of times when we think about that, a lot of people think that it just means, well, if you lash out, if you cuss somebody out, or if you throw a tantrum, an adult tantrum, that's not being a good regulator of emotion. But that also means, you know, in how you communicate your thoughts and your feelings. Do you communicate when you like something, when you don't like something? You know, so there's a lot of different ways that we can emotionally regulate, and music helps us to do that. Secondly, it helps to be present, be in the moment. This word mindfulness that's also floating around everywhere, buzzword, it is just meaning helping you to be present, right? So sometimes we listen to music passively, but it's important that we take time to be present, especially if we have a crazy day, a lot in our minds, to stop and maybe do some active listening in when we're listening to our music or working on something. Also, it allows individuals, as we talked about, to express your thoughts and feelings beyond words, helps to improve communication, and it has the ability to adapt to wherever you are in your personal growth journey. So this is why using artistic expression as a therapeutic tool is very healthy for your growth and your healing. I want to talk about expressive art therapy. So expressive art therapy is something that isn't as traditional, and I'm all for it. I love it. This is why we're here. So have you guys ever heard of therapy in general? Has anyone ever known of it, talked about therapy? Yeah. So mostly when you hear about therapy or you see it in movies, TV, it's talk therapy. So a therapist is there, a counselor is there, you're talking to them about your problems. But expressive art therapy is a approach where you use art to help you identify your issue or find the words to explain. So for example, the way that I use it with a lot of my adolescent young adult clients is, for example, if they have a hard time explaining something to me, I will ask them to draw it out. So when that person said this to you in this situation, can you draw me an image of how you felt when that happened? So they'll draw, stick people, they might put scribbles, shapes, and then we talk about it. And in them telling me what the image is, they're telling me about, what it is that they're processing. So expressive art therapy essentially is an action-oriented and sensory-based form of psychotherapy. So it's not about just talking.
Right.
It can be used with the talk therapy approaches. I do that, but it is important for people who maybe have gone through trauma, or people who come from cultures where art is something that's embedded in what they know, to incorporate that. And it's also has the purpose of being inclusive, right? This whole world of inclusion and diversity and equity is all over the place. But expressive art in therapy is important because it allows us to express and to identify ourselves in a way that's beyond just one form.
Right.
So music and sound can be two mediums of using expressive art therapy. And the reason I wanted to share this with you guys, I know it's probably new and foreign and all the things, but if you're someone who's considering therapy, or you're in therapy right now, asking your therapist to incorporate some of this stuff into your treatment or your sessions can be very helpful if they feel comfortable and competent to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So like, and what I'm getting from this, Aijia, is there's sort of traditional methods, but then there's like these non-traditional methods that can still be probably equally, if not even more effective, depending on whom, you know, the use case is, right?
Yes.
No.
No, I was just going to say the reason why modern research in expressive arts therapy is so powerful and proves that it works is because it essentially, if somebody is neurodivergent, meaning they have various mental health conditions that are not stuck to the traditional way of thinking or being, it allows them to feel like they have a level of control over the situation or over their own minds. I feel like some of the traditional approaches are not accessible to people who have various mental health conditions or come from different cultures.
Right.
Right.
And I think that's even something worth noting too, like the whole culturally relevant and responsiveness, because if we know what we know about history and, you know, just the way that these things often get put together, you know, many cases like Black voices and, you know, other voices are not being included in these types of, you know, traditions, right?
Exactly.
And so the idea of sort of, you know, well, who says this isn't therapy? Like, right? Like who says, right? Who decides what is and what isn't? You know what I mean? So I think that's a really interesting just thought that you brought forward.
Yes, and as musicians, as creative people, and just people in general, I think it is very important if you are someone who ever wants to explore therapy to do some research and know that not every therapist does it the same way. Right? So in my work, obviously, I bring in my history and my expertise and my experiences into the way I do it. But it's important to find the right fit. And if you feel like art holds a very important part of your heart and of your life, then being able to incorporate this into how you process things can be very soothing and comforting.
Real. Yeah. And like, it's crazy because even as, you know, we're doing our workshops and people come at, you know, different things that we've done. And like, one of the things we've always heard from different, participants and just people coming through would be like, wow, like, you know, playing music has been like therapeutic for me, or, you know, when we made this song, or, you know, just being able to do something like this with other people, like had such a deep impact for me. And so like, it's interesting hearing you come in with like, you know, the research and like, you know, the professional sort of background to say, yeah, like a lot of these things actually have been demonstrated over time to have impact, right? And be meaningful. So
and music and art has been research has shown that it's essentially the first type of therapy. Because when you think back to the, you know, ancient of days, you know, when, you know, we didn't have technology, we didn't have as much access to research and the information, people used art to figure out and navigate life. So I want to talk about now, you know, the commitment to self-work as musicians, as creatives. Why commit to working on myself? Why commit to bringing up difficult, uncomfortable emotions and going through the process of unraveling the traumas or, the difficult things I've gone through in my life, because it allows you to further connect to your art. Why? Why could the idea of committing to self-work have some sort of impact on your art? I'd love to talk about that. It builds on your empowerment and your confidence. When you know more about yourself, you know more about your wants, your needs, you know and understand more of what you value and how you want to align those values to the things, the connections you make, the people that you are collaborating with, the bands that you're working with and all that. It helps you to be more intentional and more grounded as well, especially if you're going to be an artist that tours and has to go long stretches in different environments.
Right.
Yeah.
I was just going to add, when you think about, I was just thinking about this, like, I feel like for me in my sort of journey, I look at self-work, but like for me, it's like very closely tied to like, to God,
Yeah.
like it's like, I can't see myself for truly who I am without seeing myself from that perspective, from the perspective. And so like for me, like I feel like even when I think about art, I feel like because I believe there's a creator.
Yes.
So I believe like just looking at like I get inspired, like just being just going outside, just just seeing so many things
His
and
handiwork.
experiences. listen, like the artist, like you know what I'm saying, like the greatest of all times, like you know what I mean, like just it really connects with me.
And one thing that you're saying when it comes to just how you relate this to just your relationship with God is I think this all comes down to identity. When you do self-work and you recognize more of who you are and how you want to show up in the creative space, you understand and you can come closer to recognizing your identity at the core, and everything else that comes out of you and that you connect yourself to is better aligned with who you believe you are as a person in terms of your identity.
It's huge.
Why is it difficult to commit to this self-work? Because there's stigma, right? There's a lack of knowledge or understanding of its importance. There's shame, a feeling of which is a feeling of embarrassment or humiliation that arises from the perception of having done something wrong. Some people are just not ready, and that's okay. But some people aren't ready to endure the process that's required, right? Some people don't recognize that because there's a cycle of change. And so in the cycle of change, you can go from being a little bit, in disbelief that there is a change that has to be made, and you can get to the point at the end of this cycle of change where you're like, okay, I'm ready to do whatever I need to do to see the change I'm saying I want. But some people are just not there. Some people don't recognize that there is self-work to do, or that there are elements within themselves that they can afford to work or grow on because they're just not there. And some people believe that, well, I can make good art without working on myself, or
I'm talented.
or I don't want to touch that. Why am I going to touch that trauma or touch that difficult experience when I could just make art? So it's possible to make art, and good art without doing self-work, but it has a lot of other effects around that can have an impact on your life. So there's this awesome quote from this mental health practitioner named Brené Brown, and she says, "Shame erodes our courage, and it fuels disengagement." Can we go to the next slide? So I think it's important to identify the difference between shame and guilt. The reason I wanted to talk a little bit about shame here is because it is often the thing that keeps us from improving ourselves and from really putting ourselves out there as well when it comes to our music and our art. We talked about shame, but the definition of guilt is that it's feelings of deserving to hold on to blame, especially for imagined offenses or a sense of inadequacy. So shame is essentially feeling like you've done something wrong, and guilt is basically self-blame. So they're very close, but shame is more, I would say, a thing that you feel is imposed on the outside world, whereas guilt is a little bit more internal. So, how does it affect Black creatives? A lot of us here are from the Black community, maybe not all, but it prevents us from asking for help, right? Out of fear of negative judgment from others. Even within our community as musicians, we may not want to collaborate with other people because we have shame about people seeing, whatever song that you're writing or in the works.
Right.
Are you guys the type of musicians or artists who don't like to share your art when it's still in the process of being made?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Right. Fear. There's that fear of judgment. It can lead also to emotional, spiritual, and physical isolation when you feel shame. Right. Feelings of invalidity, as we talked about. Right. The lack of acceptance of yourself or others. People pleasing behaviors to feel accepted. Right. A lot of us could probably relate to people pleasing in some way. Isolation to avoid facing the discomfort of whatever shame or guilt you might have. Addiction, which we've kind of touched on, and abusive relationships. I want to talk a little bit about the history behind shame, especially within our Black community. Where does it come from? Well, we have to go all the way back centuries to slavery, right? Guilt and shame were weaponized during slavery, right? It was a method of fear-based control.
Control, yeah.
Yeah. The seeds of all of this stem from the racial discrimination experience throughout interpersonal, institutional, and cultural interactions. So some of it is systemic, as we talk about racism and all those things, but sometimes it's also cultural, right? Sometimes the way that our culture has been brought up is, certain things bring shame upon family, and so you therefore don't do certain things. So sometimes it's also within our own cultures that we don't want to put ourselves out there, and that's kind of where the root and the seed of that mentality comes from. How does this affect our mental health? Well, it encourages negative core beliefs. So a core belief is something that at the root you believe about yourself or the world around you, right? So something that's wrong with you, you're not worthy of something, you're not lovable, those are core beliefs. Low self-esteem, the increase of or the risk of depression, increase or risk of anxiety, as well as eating disorders for men and for women. Yeah.
And as you mentioned, like sometimes this can be a side effect almost of that shame, like a byproduct, if you will,
Yes.
of these feelings that now. So it started with something maybe more internalized, but it starts to really play out
in your music or
in
your art.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Wow.
So how do we change this narrative as creatives, as musicians going forward, right? We need to break the silence. This conversation today is part of that, right? Break the silence, shine light on shame that might exist for you. Change the way that you view yourself, right? Learning to believe that you are worthy of change, empathy, love through forgiveness of yourself, and accepting help. Doing the deep heart work, acknowledging that any other feelings attached to your shame, embracing community, finding people that you feel safe, seen, and heard by, and know that you're not meant to do life alone as a creative and just as a person. And recognize that you can take control of your narrative, your story, your life experiences by empowering yourself, right? And using your art to empower, or even just listening to art that inspires you to help build on your empowerment.
One of the things you said, Aijia, that I just really resonated with me, like a lot of us, because every time we're thinking about, ourselves as artists, there's almost like a sense of wanting to belong.
Of course.
You know what I mean? Because like usually in the art form, there tends to be things that came before you that maybe even inspired you. And so there's this desire that like, I want to contribute something to this great body of work that I appreciate, that I find valuable.
Yes.
Right? And so when you talk about shame and guilt, it's like you might be warring with that feeling of, well, is what I'm putting forth going to be accepted? Right? And so like, I feel like that I know I'll speak for myself, like as a musician.
Yeah.
Especially like, and I've seen this, like I used to see people will be playing, maybe they're just coming off into the journey or whatever, and like be like laughed at, like literally like ridiculed by people that could maybe be more experienced or perhaps more better or whatever you want to say.
Yes.
But like at the same time, you kind of have to like deconstruct that. It's like why? Like why? You know what I mean? Why? Like does that make you? Does that does putting someone else down?
Well, of course.
Then
That's what it's
elevate
about.
your like.
That is what it's about.
But it's so like it's dumb. Like you
Yeah.
know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
I just think about that because it's like one of the reasons even I think for me why I thought it was really important for there to be spaces
Yeah.
where you can develop your craft. And it doesn't mean like
Yes.
there's a difference between like encouraging or even like constructive criticism versus like
Putting
stuff
down?
exactly stuff that's just meant to like put people down. And so like for me, I think a really important part of that was trying to say what are the spaces where people can come together and still want to grow, still want to improve the artistry and the quality and
Yes.
level up in that sense, but
Right.
in a way wherein you can be safe
Yeah.
doing it. You know what I mean? So yeah, I just wanted to just share that as you were talking.
No, I really appreciate that. And I think that goes back to what we started talking about earlier about, why do you create music? Why do you create art? Is it to show up, one up people, or
Right.
is it more for yourself? Like what
Right.
is your purpose behind and what is your why? Yeah. Yeah. So we're coming close to the end, but I want to talk about how to manage good mental health. So attending therapy where you feel safe, seen, and heard is an option. Not everyone can afford therapy. Not everyone, and I think it's important to talk about that, right? Not therapy is another buzzword, but not everyone has the resources. Especially as musicians, if you're a full-time musician, things are not always consistent in terms of financial, income, all the things. There are other ways to help manage good mental health, but this is one way. The second way is bibliotherapy. So reading literature, and I'll give you a couple resources at the end of this presentation here. So reading literature, sound journal, research-based articles, going on TikTok, going on YouTube. I would say just be mindful because anyone can put anything out there, right, on
Right.
socials, and sometimes they're not necessarily competent to be sharing that information, or it's not backed by research. So, just in doing your own reading, looking to see where is the source coming from can be helpful.
Right.
Finding community where you feel also safe, seen, and heard, and who share the same values that you do. Boundary setting, right? So recognizing personal capacity and honoring it. I believe as musicians, we don't do this very well. Set boundaries for whether it's the time you go to sleep, whether it's how you're eating. A lot of us don't have the best eating habits. And recognizing your capacity. Are you accepting gigs because you want opportunities to exposure, right? That word exposure, we've all heard it, I'm sure. Or are you going beyond what you can do, right? Self-reflection. Do you take time, like we did today, through that exercise to pause, stop for a second, and reflect? Where am I at today? Where am I at in this season of my life? Reflecting, being mindful of your stressors, and finding healthy ways to manage your distress. What is making you stressed? If you feel like you're not doing well in other parts of your health holistically, then maybe we have to stop for a second and think about what is it that's adding to my stress. And lastly, identifying what your core values are. A lot of times when we don't have good mental health, it's because we're not aligned in various areas of our lives with our values, whether it's relationships, whether it's career, whether it's what gigs you're accepting versus not. So what are your core values, and align your life choices with those values.
Wow, love that.
Okay, next slide, please. How to further connect with your art. We already talked about a lot of this, right? Learning yourself. Let it reflect you authentically. Discovering your voice and what you want to say with your art. The only way you can do this is through the self-work. So unfortunately, people, you can't get around it if you
Yup.
want to be the best that you can be, right? As a musician. And identify your why and validate it. Right? Your why is valid. In summary, we talked about a lot. Musician mental health and wellness is important, right? It has a direct impact on your life as a musician, a creative, and the art itself. Music has the power to help us heal and process life as we grow. It is a tool, but may not be the answer. Answer meaning you may have to do some deep-rooted work beyond the music to amplify your music. And let's not ignore the heart or the soul. One thing I didn't explain earlier is that the soul essentially is the depiction of your emotions, your thoughts, your mind. It's all encompassing. So your heart is essentially like the soil of the things that spring up in terms of your feelings, thoughts, behaviors, and the soul kind of encompasses those things, but the heart is at the core. Our music, our art depends on such care.
Awesome. Well,
I just want to say thank you to Joelle and the team here at Soundcheck. You know, it is a pleasure to know that there are spaces here within Canada, the Greater Toronto area, in creating these safe spaces, these spaces for individuals to grow, to learn, and to commune with one another. But also the fact that you are so open to having conversations like this that are not necessarily comfortable amongst our community as musicians. So thank you.
We're honored. Thank you, Aijia.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone, for coming. We're so grateful for each and every one of you taking time out of your busy days to hang with us.
Thank you.
Feel free to stick around. If you're in person, say hello. And if not, if you're online, we also thank you for coming and joining in as well.
Yeah.
We appreciate you all. Take care, everybody, and we're signing off.
Take care.
Blessings to folks. Take care.
Bye-bye.